When we have a monogamous society that's underpinned with Christian values, okay, and there is something inherently socialised into us about the fact that women should be pure, and there's value in, I mean, Tony Abbott said it himself, he thinks that I mean, I don't know if you know who Tony Abbott is.
I've heard about him, I've been here, yeah. A great man.
He expressed a statement that his daughters, he felt it was inherently valuable for his daughters to remain pure until they were married. And I think insofar as that's a socialised norm, it underpins all the rationalisation for the enjoyment that men get out of seeing women to be unpurified. And in this gonzo porn, it seems like that attitude towards women seems to be reinforced by society insofar as we believe that women can't be sexually liberated, they must remain pure until they're married. And I just can't see how you can avoid making a claim about purity, because it seems to underpin almost everything you say.
Okay, first of all, remember, the whole notion around women being pure and chastity was actually about property rights, right? This is the key thing. The whole idea why men developed this whole bizarre concept of our purity, right? And when they talk about our purity, they really mean we're dirty and we need to be controlled, okay? Is that they wanted to make sure that they were passing on property rights to their male heir. I think it's a very dangerous thing to talk about women as purity, because it gives birth to the fact that you put us on a pedestal and you don't need much to knock us off the pedestal.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying purity is actually pernicious. Like, is everyone...
Yes, yeah, okay, and I'm answering that to say that and it is that notion, I think, that has given birth to pornography, has given birth to the idea that women's bodies should be policed, and wherever you go in a society, it seems to be the purity of women obsesses men, whether they put us in a whatever, purdah or whatever, or they put us in I've forgotten the name of that thing, a burqa, whether they veil us or whether we have to be in pornography, the same messages over and over and over again that our sexuality has to be controlled. And it just so happens that men are the very best of controlling us. So, yeah, I think we need to deconstruct that notion of purity.
We'll make a claim of how that's done.
How's it done?
How do you
Feminist revolution, that's how we do it. The answer to everything.
Hi, Gail.
Hello, hi.
I'm part of an Australian project that seeks to encourage people to critique the messages about gender and sex that are in pornography, and to encourage ways of thinking about sex that are about mutual respect and pleasure and communication. And part of that is through engaging in public discourse. We're making a documentary film and writing articles. And part of it's about developing education resources. We're working with people who are writing the mainstream sexuality resources for Victorian secondary schools. And my question to you is, how do we capture young people's imaginations to encourage them to be countercultural about this? What sort of... So one of the ones that we've talked about is that young men want to be good lovers. They don't want to be crap lovers. They don't want to be known as crap lovers. So part of it is helping them to see that porn's likely to teach them to be selfish, lazy lovers, not to know how to please a partner. But what are some of the other sort of hooks, if you like, to sort of capture their imagination about a world that's a bit better than porn?
And that's a great question that I think that radical feminism absolutely has to address. And it just so happens that we're having a 2-day seminar in Boston to address this in June, which is how do we become relevant to the lives of young women? And one way that I have seen going across this country and also in the United States of America is when you start to talk about their lives honestly. What does it mean for a young woman to be dating men who use porn? What does it mean for men increasingly to having to live up to what they think is a porn image of sexuality? So I think one way that young people, they don't like to think they're being seduced, they don't like to think they're being manipulated, and I think it's very important to explain to them just how pornography is manipulating and seducing them. And then what we need to do is we need to spend time talking about what does a really hot, creative, loving, life-affirming sexuality look like in the place of what I would say is a death-loving sexuality, which is what pornography is. But, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to capture the imagination, because, look, you've got a slut walk happening this weekend. That has captured the imagination. Unfortunately, I think it's to call it the slut walk and to put the actual spotlight on women is a mistake here, because we need to put the spotlight on men and what they do. So we should be in there front and centre to figure this out. So I agree.
Hi, Gail.
Hello.
Thanks. I have two questions. One is a personal one and the other's political. Perhaps I'll start with the personal. I watched the Q&A program the other day, and I was astounded at how rudely you were treated, how you were cut off regularly. Your arguments weren't properly engaged with. Most of the other panellists who are cultural elites were...
boys.
You know,
I was with the boys. It was adolescent boy time.
I was disappointed that Cannell joined the little boys club.
She was the biggest boy of them all.
Yeah, quite a bully. I was wondering how you actually manage that. I mean, you've got a very radical argument. You're in the front line now. You hold the torch, in a sense, for a lot of us who are radical feminists or identify as radical feminists, and yet you get these 2-minute media sound bites that essentially caricature what you're saying. You were the only one, I thought, that had a utopian message about masculinity, insofar as you had an understanding that men weren't born this way. The others were waxing lyrical about human nature.
Weren't they just?
But there was no actual substantive engagement with your ideas. So one is, how do you manage that? My other question...
Let me answer that. And
sure.
Then you can say, how you manage that is... lots of meditation, actually, in terms of keeping calm and realising as well, and I say this to my students, and I really mean this is not about me. Okay, what I do out there is not about me. This is about a movement. It's about feminism. It's about changing women's lives. So if I want to sort of decompensate on the middle, I'm fucking up the very thing that I want to do, which is to sort of make change. And I keep reminding myself this. When they go after me, they don't know who I am. You know, when they insult me, they don't know who they've got no clue about me. And so it's very important that this is bigger than me, what I'm out doing there. And that really keeps me going about that, yeah.
Well, good on you. My other question, as a psychotherapist, I've encountered through colleagues and so on, adult women discovering their partners using porn. So what I've noticed in your writings and in some of the other writings like Naomi Wolf, who's not as radical, but there's a focus on college students and on young people. I'm wondering what you'd say for, I guess, how you would address the point that older women are dealing with this too, and what they're dealing with is not as much, as problematic as this may be, the political ramifications of porn or the abuse of women, but feeling betrayed by their partners looking at young, nubile women and feeling that as normal women in their 30s, 40s, 50s and 60s, they don't measure up. So my sense is there's two discussions. There's the young men and then there's how is it for older women. And I have a colleague who works for Relationships Australia, and she said this is coming up again and again, women discovering, and they're mortified. Oh my God, my husband's into, you know, hot teen pussy and nubiles and these sort of sites that are just mortifying.
Well, you know, in America, the recent meeting of the Divorce Lawyers Association of America said that one of the biggest single causes of divorce today is porn use, if you can wrap your head around that. So first, and you know, I was on the TV today at the Radio Melbourne discussion hour at 11, and you know how many women were calling in with exactly that they're finding their husbands, and they do feel betrayed. There's actually research out this now that they feel like it's been an affair. We need to start addressing this. These women need to speak out. And what I think was so clear today, why so many women were calling up the radio, was it was the first time ever they found a place where they could talk about the reality of their lives and not feel so shamed. Because can you imagine how ashamed you must feel because you can't talk about it to anybody, that your husband's addicted to pornography? So one of the things I do, I don't know if you know, but there's an excellent website called healthysex.com run by Wendy and Larry Maltz, who are both sex therapists, who've written a book called The Porn Trap. And what I do is tell many people to go read the book The Porn Trap, because it's the first book I've seen that really addresses the issue of how to deal with partners, mainly men, who are indeed addicted to pornography. This is something we have to start discussing. It has to be out there now, yeah.
Unfortunately, we've got time for one more question, and I think you were there. Gail is going to be signing books after the event, so...
Right. I was just going to ask, you mentioned something about, you know, finding creative ways of communicating to younger women about, you know, sex and sexuality. But when you've got, you know, it's all well and good to be in a room where, you know, like-minded people sort of think the same when it comes to sexuality and how women are perceived. But when you've got people like Kim Kardashian, who's in the media and who really got big through making something like a sex tape and then has gone on to become this successful woman, and young people look up to her thinking maybe I should be like Kim. And I think there was an article in the newspaper a couple of weeks ago sort of showing how younger girls and teenagers are dressing like Kim Kardashian, trying to be like her. And you've got singers, throwing lyrics in there. I think Rihanna had a song talking about, sex and whips excite me and things like that. And how do you then, as a young woman faced with so many of these images and people telling you that, or the media telling you that you should be a certain way, you should act a certain way, but then that you shouldn't really, but, when you're dating or when you're seeing someone, and they have these expectations because of what the media is portraying, how do you consolidate that, and how do you then begin to, because it's almost like you're fighting a battle that you can't really win, really. It feels like that.
And let me say, when I speak to young women in college campuses, and I put it this way, this is when the light bulbs go off. I say to the women today, you have two choices. You're either fuckable or invisible. That's the culture. And they all know, because they know what fuckable looks like and they know what invisible looks like. And my argument is that in a culture where your best friend and everyone else is walking around with the low-slung jeans and the thong and the high-heel shoes and the pierced belly button and looks fuckable, what choices do you have not to conform? Because you, as an adolescent girl, have a developmental need to absolutely fit in, which means to look fuckable. And when we start talking about that and lack of choices and how you're being pressured and pushed into an identity that's not of your making, that is actually made elsewhere, it is so profound for them. And let me tell you, this works. It really works, because every time when I teach a course in feminist theory, I go into that classroom and I've got 30 students, and not one of them would say they're a feminist on the first day. Not one says they're a feminist, okay? By week 4, they're arguing whether they're radical or Marxist or socialist feminist. That's the fight going on in class, okay? So I can tell you that feminism is still extremely compelling. The first thing they read that they fall in love with is an article by Andrea Dworkin called Feminism and Agenda. It's like unbelievable. And this is like 30-odd years old, and it is as relevant today as it was then. So I can tell you, after teaching women for 20-odd years, if I go in and I teach liberal feminism, I get looked blank. Yeah, well, very interesting. I go in and teach radical feminism, bang, the room explodes. So this is our way in, because it explains their life. I remember what happened to me the first time I read radical feminism. I remember thinking, I have been waiting for this my entire life, and I didn't even know I was waiting for it, okay? It changed my life. So I would say, as we as feminists, we have to keep the radical message alive, because that is the only way we are going to attract young women. We are in a crazy, crazy pornographic culture, and for that we need extreme measures, and I can't think of anything better than radical feminism for that.
And luckily we're ending there, because that's fantastic, Gail. I'm probably about to pass out, so I will start coughing in quite an embarrassing manner. Thank you so much, Gail.
Thank you.
And as I said, there'll be a book signing in the New International Bookshop, and I think Gail will be doing that for half an hour. Be gentle. She's very, very tired.
This was great. This was the antidote to Q&A. What do you mean? I'm totally energised.
You wait till the book signing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.